This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Libyan Electoral Board wants elections postponed for a month. South African study suggests COVID cases of the Omicron strain are less severe. And Ethiopia says any future peace talks with the TPLF have to be centered on justice and accountability. This is Africa Live. Hello and thank you for joining us. I am Peninah Karibe. With me in studio with the business headlines is Rama.
Thank you very much, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in the next half hour. Public outcry in Zimbabwe over a proposed tax on smartphones. We'll have the details. And post-harvest wastage in Nigeria is a growing problem. It's now worth $8 million every year. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. Libya's Electoral Board has suggested that the country's presidential election should be postponed by a month to the 24th of January. The announcement came after a parliamentary committee tasked with overseeing the electoral process said it was impossible to hold the first round of presidential polls on Friday as originally scheduled. The election is part of a United Nations-backed plan aimed at restoring stability. But the delay is a big blow to efforts to end 10 years of chaos in the country since 2011. CGTN's Adel Mahroui is live for us in Cairo for an update on this. Adel, Libya's Electoral Board has postponed the polls and they say they should be held in January 24th. What more can you tell us?
The Elections Committee has not yet finalized the legal procedures for announcing the final list of candidates. There are numerous appeals against many candidates in about 13 of Libya's courts. And therefore, before announcing the final list of candidates, the Elections Committee must be sure that all legal tracks have been consumed, that a final verdict in all of these appeals have been reached. And that's why it has not been able, up until now, that's less than 48 hours to the crucial vote, to announce the final list of candidates who people should be voting for on Friday, December 24. But basically what is happening now is that the Elections Authority is not deciding to postpone. It does not have actually the authority to change the date, but it is announcing it officially as a recommendation to push the vote to at least 1 month so that it will be held on the 24th of January. Peninah?
And that recommendation, Adel, for a 1-month postponement comes as a parliamentary committee said that it was impossible for the election to be held on the scheduled date. What has the reaction been in Libya to that announcement?
So actually the first official body to say that there is no time, as you've mentioned, is the Eastern-based parliament. And politicians there have warned before the Elections Committee that there is really no time to hold. What is the reaction? Generally, it is mixed up. We know that there have been a meeting for 10 Libyan presidential candidates who have been gathering in Benghazi for a first-of-a-kind event so that they would discuss the further plan, the future plan of what will happen in this new transition, as Libya has been expecting to end its political transition with elections on Friday. Now there is a new emergence. Politicians in Libya and here in Cairo, where President Sisi also met top Libyan officials to discuss the next step for Libya.
All right, thank you very much for that update. Adel Mahroui live in Cairo. Meanwhile, Libya's Parliamentary Electoral Committee now says it's impossible for the country to hold the presidential election on the 24th of December as planned. The country's electoral board has, on its part, suggested a 1-month postponement of the poll, but no official decision has been made. In another development, at least 7 Libyan presidential candidates gathered in Benghazi for talks 3 days ahead of the official election date. This, as Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi also held discussions with the head of Libya's Presidency Council. Adel Mahroui once again with the details.
The Libyan Elections Committee is suggesting a 1-month delay to the presidential election scheduled to take place this Friday. It's the second official recommendation to delay the vote after the eastern-based parliament declared it impossible to hold the December 24 election on time.
1 month should be enough to overcome all legal challenges for the vote. The fate of the elections will be clear after the next parliamentary session to discuss the matter. They may accept the elections committee's proposal or they may refuse.
Rival presidential candidates in Libya gathered ahead of the announcement in a rare meeting in Benghazi. The meeting appears to be planning for the next transition after the likely delay of the vote. The gathering saw foes from western and eastern Libya sit in one room for the first time since 2014 in the eastern city, that is the base of Khalifa Haftar, the commander of the Libyan National Army.
The meeting is a good opportunity to break the political stagnation in Libya, especially after that the December 24 election will be delayed. Some see it as a positive move to establish Libyan dialogue. Others fear these candidates may be collaborating to push away the rest of the competitors, including Gaddafi's son, Said al-Islam, Dibeiba, or others.
Libya's candidates agreed to strengthen Libya's reconciliation efforts and avoid the division of the country.
Some prominent presidential candidates, like the Speaker of the Eastern-based Parliament, Aqila Saleh, and the interim Prime Minister, Abdelhamid Dibeiba, did not attend the Benghazi meeting. Yet it is still considered one of the biggest signs of political tolerance seen in Libya this year.
Talks concerning the next political roadmap in Libya extended to Egypt. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi hosted the President of Libya's Presidency Council, Mohammed al-Menfi, in Cairo.
I think Menfi is in Cairo to get regional and international support so that the current executive authority remains in power until elections are held and an elected authority emerges.
President Sisi stressed that he will support any effort that leads to stability in Libya without mentioning any preferred dates for the general elections. Sisi also said that he wants to help Libya see its military institutions unified within the framework of the UN-backed 5+5 Military Commission, a committee that includes military representatives from rival Libyan regions. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Many actors took part in the planning for Libya's election. The election was meant to create stability in a country which has seen conflict for years. On October 23, 2020, the warring LNA and GNA signed a ceasefire agreement. The agreement was drafted by several foreign powers and the UN. In November, factions within the UN-backed Libyan Political Dialogue Forum agreed to set up a new transitional government. They also agreed to hold presidential and parliamentary elections on December 24th. On February 6th this year, Abdelhamid Dibeiba was nominated by the LPDF as interim prime minister. A 3-month presidency council was also established. The Electoral Commission began registering presidential candidates on November 8th. Among those who registered were Prime Minister Abdelhamid Dibeiba, Eastern Military Commander Khalifa Haftar, and Saif al-Islam Gaddafi. Gaddafi's registration was a contentious issue. He is the son of former ruler Muammar Gaddafi. On November 24th, the Electoral Commission disqualified Saif al-Islam Gaddafi among 25 other candidates. His candidacy was, however, reinstated in December. As parties failed to reach a legal framework for the polls, the Electoral Commission said it was not ready to publish the list of candidates. And then, finally, on December 22nd, the same commission said it would be impossible to hold the vote on December 24th. Let's go to South Africa, where scientists say that the Omicron COVID variant is less severe than other strains of the disease. This has been concluded from a study that suggests reduced risks of hospitalization and severe disease. Authors of the study say that this is likely because of high population immunity. The study is based on people who contracted the Omicron variant between October and November. Those who were affected during this time were found to be 70% less likely to develop serious sickness or be hospitalized. This is compared to those who were diagnosed with the Delta strain between April and November. Experts have been researching on the harmfulness of the latest strain as authorities race to find ways to curb its spread and researchers work to understand it. As the Omicron variant spreads across the world, governments are looking at how to curb its spread. In Zimbabwe, the government has put in place a mandatory 14-day quarantine for travelers entering the country. This is hampering holiday plans of several Zimbabweans living in South Africa.
South Africa is a second home to many Zimbabwean workers. Holiday season usually is the time they return to Zimbabwe to visit their families. But the Omicron variant is putting those plans in jeopardy. A mandatory 14-day quarantine is impacting travel plans.
I don't know how we're going to do it. If they want to quarantine as us, we're going to be quarantined. If they let us go, we're going to go. We follow the instructions.
But there are travelers like Albert who are determined to travel home. Albert hasn't seen his family in Zimbabwe since 2018. Both he and his wife have taken out loans to cover the cost of quarantine.
You can't have you can't stay maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years without seeing your parents. There's difficulties, and also you got children who are there. You see, now we see we must see them, and they must see us. You see, so that's why we decided to travel now.
It's not just travelers who are impacted. Tour operators are witnessing a significant drop in business.
Since COVID started, we don't have a business. You look as you see, it's very quiet. Even the booth, I have look, no business. This quarantine, this is COVID killing our business. So people are scared when they go into Zimbabwe, they are getting quarantine. So no one business as usual. It's compared another years ago. This year there's no business.
Our business is very low. Customers, the passengers are not going back to Zim. And about the COVID-19, you know, they are afraid for quarantine and what is talking at the borders.
As Omicron continues to gain dominance, holiday plans remain up in the air for many. Astatal, CGTN.
CGTN's Angelo Kupla joins us live from Johannesburg for more on this. Angelo, a South African study suggests reduced risks of hospitalization and severe disease in people infected with the Omicron coronavirus variant versus the Delta one. What more can you tell us?
Well, look, that report that was issued today that we sat in on is a preprint and hasn't been peer reviewed just yet, but it is good news. The reasons aren't clear yet why there's a reduced severity, but it could be because of natural immunity, it could be because of vaccines are working, or it could be that the virus itself is less likely to cause severe illness. That's according to those experts. Most of the fatalities that we have been reporting on are of people who weren't vaccinated, so there's that, or have been partially vaccinated. Interestingly, though, it's also showing that once hospitalized, Delta and Omicron sufferers didn't show a huge difference in outcomes. Bear in mind, of course, that fewer people have been hospitalized with Omicron, but the data is important, especially the data on the clinical severity, as I'm told, of the variant when compared to previous variants. And that's because it's needed to guide public health planning and responses. So the data is definitely good news, Peninah.
How is South Africa dealing with the fourth wave ahead of the festive season?
Well, that's been an interesting scenario to watch. There's evidence of virus fatigue, that people on the streets aren't that interested in adhering to the rules. Gauteng is over its peak as far as we're concerned in terms of what the experts are telling us, most of which is now Omicron, and that's based on sequencing done by the National Institute for Communicable Diseases. Coastal provinces, though, are reporting spikes, and many people have left Gauteng for their annual holidays and are going to those coastal regions. So testing is low in Gauteng because there's no one here. It also wasn't high to start with, according to the experts on Ramaphosa's Ministerial Advisory Committee meeting group, who suggested it's as low as 1 in 10 people who are displaying symptoms who actually go for testing. That means that 9 other people have stayed away, and mainly because of the cost of the test. And that's why there's been a suggestion at that MAC that people don't, in fact, need to go into quarantine if they come into contact with an infected person, if they aren't displaying any symptoms. But you know what? Let's see what happens with that infection rate come 10 days' time when the holiday season is in full swing. Peninah.
All right, Angelo, thank you for that. Angelo Kupla live for us in Johannesburg. They are watching COVID data hour by hour. That's the message from the UK government as Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced no new restrictions for now. But New Year's celebrations are in doubt. Scotland has already cancelled its traditional Hogmanay festivities, and the usual London fireworks are off.
People who test positive for COVID-19 in England can now end their self-isolation after a week. That's 3 days sooner than previous rules and will apply to those who take a negative lateral flow test on day 6 and 7.
This decision has been informed by the advice from our clinicians at the UK Health Security Agency, who have looked at this very carefully, and they are very comfortable that the protection that's provided by making this change so that people can leave isolation after day 7 as long as they've taken these 2 lateral flow tests and the results are negative, that the protection it provides is very similar to 10 days of isolation without tests.
The move could cut the disruption being caused across the UK economy, with tens of thousands of people required to quarantine each day. In particular, staff shortages are hitting the public health service at a time of increased pressure on the front line. Trade body the British Medical Association has warned almost 50,000 doctors, nurses and other staff could be off work by Christmas Day unless tougher measures are brought in. Tighter restrictions appear to be on the way, but not before the 25th of December.
Naturally, we can't rule out any further measures after Christmas, and we're going to keep a constant eye on the data. We'll do whatever it takes to protect public health. But in view of the continuing uncertainty about several things, severity of Omicron, uncertainty about the hospitalisation rate or the impact of the vaccine rollout and the boosters, we don't think today that there is enough evidence to justify any tougher measures before Christmas.
Elsewhere in the UK, Scotland has already cancelled big events for 3 weeks from Boxing Day. Wales and Northern Ireland are also planning more restrictions after Christmas as worries over the Omicron variant of COVID-19 grow. Compared to last year, high vaccine rates here in the UK mean politicians have more wiggle room. But with cases hovering near record highs of around 90,000 each day, the virus is casting a shadow over life this winter. Nawid Jabakil, CGTN, London.
The Ethiopian government says any future peace talks with TPLF rebels will have to be centered on justice and accountability. The press secretary of the Ethiopian Prime Minister's office, Peninah Karibe, told journalists at a press briefing that urgent humanitarian assistance is being delivered to all conflict-affected areas. Here's CGTN's Gurum Chala with more from Addis Ababa.
The Ethiopian Prime Minister's press secretary, Peninah Karibe, says humanitarian aid is now being urgently supplied to Amhara, Afar and Tigray regions. And so far, more than 63,000 quintals of food aid have been delivered to different locations in the Amhara region. And
particularly in the Afar region, more than 1.3 million people have been identified as in need of emergency or immediate emergency response, and close to 400,000 have been displaced as a result of TPLF's incursions within 21 waradas. So the government, together with partners, has continued helping those in conflict-affected areas. In Tigray region, the most recent update that I have is that a total of 225 trucks have, as of recent, arrived into the Tigray region with humanitarian supplies that have arrived into Mekelle, and a total of around 9,300 metric tons of food and non-food items have been delivered.
When asked about the government's plan to peacefully conclude the war in the north with TPLF, Peninah said any peace talks will be centered on justice, accountability and dialogue.
The call that you made for peace is something that the Ethiopian government still wants. The resolution of this phase is something that we're committed to in terms of ensuring that it's done in a peaceful way and through a political means. Nevertheless, any political solution will always be centered on justice, will be centered on accountability, and also in dialogue. When I refer to you in terms of dialogue, the question of who and with whom this would be done with and what are the prerequisites are details that will be unveiled in due time.
The almost a year and 3 months old conflict in Ethiopia has resulted in the damage of key infrastructure and disruption of day-to-day lives in Tigray, Amhara and Afar regions. Addis Ababa is now preparing for post-conflict reconstruction.
So post-conflict reconstruction is key. There are some areas already in which Initial infrastructure works are being undertaken, like restoring electric lines and phone lines that have been purposely, decimated. But over the next, there is a committee that has been set up under the purview of the Deputy Prime Minister, and over the next weeks, it will become more evident what the entire package for reconstruction of, conflict-affected communities would look like.
Ethiopia's economy in particular and the Eastern Africa region in general desperately need to see the return of peace in this nation. Any prolonged conflict, experts tell you, will only result in further loss of lives, displacement of millions and damage to public and private properties. And many are banking on the proposed all-inclusive dialogue to deliver the much-needed peace to Ethiopia. CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up, Nigeria says at least 45 farmers killed over the weekend in the country's central Nasarawa state. And Chinese President Xi Jinping meets Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam to hear a report on administrative work.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tense here. Bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from within the front clear line. view of this front line position.
In Nigeria's central state of Nasarawa, dozens of people have been killed in violence between farmers and herders. In a statement, the office of President Muhammadu Buhari said at least 45 farmers were killed in the violence that erupted on Friday. Dozens more were wounded. The president has vowed to go after the perpetrators. Local police said the violence broke out when armed Fulani herders attacked villagers from the Tiv ethnic group over the killing of a kinsman. Deadly clashes between herders and local farmers over grazing and water rights are common in central Nigeria. The conflict has taken on an ethnic and religious dimension in recent years. For more on this, we're joined live by CGTN's Tessem Akende in Jos. Tessem, President Buhari's office says at least 45 farmers were killed in the violence between farmers and herders in central Nigeria. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, I can say that beyond the killings that happened between Friday and Monday precisely, a lot of people have been injured as well, and other people have been displaced. There are conflicting figures to that effect. There are figures from the police and, from the Tiv tribe, and of course from the herders as well. So there are conflicting figures. But there are injured people, and many are displaced at the moment, looking for shelter. And of course, there is animosity, there is anger, there is a lot of hate between these two people, predominantly farmers, the Tiv people, predominantly farmers, and of course the herders, the Fulanis, predominantly herders. So a lot needs to be done to calm frayed nerves, and so that these people can be able to live together and cohabit peacefully.
And how is the government dealing with this violence?
Yes, there are different approaches the government at the state and of course at the federal are employing to ensure that there is peace, not just in Nasarawa state but around the states. Within the north central part of Nigeria, which has had the farmer-herder clashes for a long time. The governor of the state was in Nasarawa state, precisely in Obi local government, day before yesterday, where he had a meeting or a session with opinion leaders people from the thieves and the Fulani extractions all seated down together to see how to calm free nerves and ensure that going forward there will be peace, within the state. Beyond that, the police police personnel and of course the military as well have also come in to ensure that for the moment, temporarily perhaps, there is normalcy in the area. Of course, the president has sent, at the federal level, has sent condolences to both the Fulanis and the thief people who have lost people in the state. But he has assured that his government will be going out to ensure that lasting peace returns in Nasarawa state, yes, but of course, by extension, other parts of Nigeria as well. So these are different approaches by both the state government in Nasarawa state and of course the national, led by President Muhammadu Buhari. All right, Shasa Makenda live in Jos, thank you. Meanwhile, some female victims of the insurgency in Nigeria are rising from their challenging situation thanks to some small-scale businesses they started. They say they're determined to succeed despite the 12-year war which has claimed the lives of loved ones and ravaged their communities. Our correspondent Tessa Makenda once again with the details from Jos in northern Nigeria.
Aisha Yohana, a displaced victim of the insurgency from Borno State, owns this hairdressing salon in Jos. She lost 2 brothers and other relations to terrorist attacks in Borno State in 2013. Aisha says she established the salon with support from a relative, having learnt the skill of hair making and dressing in Jos.
When I came to Jos, I met a friend of mine. She's making hair. I just thought over it. I say, okay, I'm now displaced, so what can I make it out to help my family and help myself, because I'm a lady. I say, okay, let me learn from her so that I can help my family and help myself too.
The United Nations Refugee Agency says the insurgency in northern Nigeria has claimed 37,000 lives and displaced over 2 million people in the country. At least 12 houses were destroyed by suspected Boko Haram terrorists in Borno State earlier this month in a bomb attack. Economic analysts say women like Aisha, who have been resilient and emerged through the conflict, deserve special commendation.
A lot of young ones, even adults that are not from that part of the country, but they are not doing anything, but they are just shouting unemployment, unemployment. But them, the displaced ones, they actually left their home state due to the insurgency, and they came to another place. After coming, they decided to start up something. So it's actually really, really commendable.
Experts want the government to encourage the entrepreneurial drive of women like Aisha.
The government should develop a model in which those people that have been displaced from their local government, from their home state, from their villages, where they can the government can actually render intervention programs, give them startup capital so that they can be able to start up something, maybe tailoring or so.
The government says it is acting. The government in March this year launched a $1 billion appeal fund for 6.5 million victims of insurgency in Nigeria through its humanitarian response plan. It is also partnering with the United Nations Development Program to train an initial 500 women and children on skills to work in a diversity of trades and disciplines. Aisha looks forward to seeing her business boom and is pledging free training for victims of conflicts like her so as to empower them too. Tessim Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
To some breaking news now, and Ethiopia is claiming the capture of a Tigrayan city from rebels. We're joined now by CGTN's Groom Chala live in Addis Ababa for the very latest. Groom, what more can you tell us about the government's reported capture of a Tigrayan city?
Peninah, after this news came on different news platforms, as you have also tried to refer, we've been speaking to different government officials. They said that the Ethiopian National Defense Force have continued clearing areas which were captured by rebel force for the last 4 to 5 months. most of them in the Amhara regional state. We've been reporting several times now. Many strategic locations are now freed from this rebel force, including in the Afar regional state. Now, the government is saying that there is no advancement, by the way, to the Tigray regional state as we know at the moment. What they are saying is these areas being captured are perhaps disputed between the Amhara regional state and the Tigray regional state. There is this border issue that has been there for a long time. Mentioned Western Tigray, for instance, where the Amhara regional state is saying that these areas were mine and they should be under my regional authority, where the Tigray regional state is also claiming the same thing. That's the disputed area. So from now on, by the way, whichever area being captured around and further to the Amhara regional state is going to be a disputed area. That's why the national dialogue is intended also to resolve such kinds of border issues in the country. But what we hear from within the government is that the national army has no plan for now of advancing to the capital Mekelle itself and also fight the Tigrayan force inside the Tigray regional state. But the work of clearing the enemy, as they say it, from different parts of the Amhara regional state, including a town of Sokotra, north of the Lalibela city, the historic city, has continued. There is a breaking news coming out, but the disputed areas cannot be said whether they are in Amhara or Tigray regional state until decisions are made.
All right, Gurum, we appreciate the update. Thank you very much. Gurum Chala live in Addis Ababa. Let's shift our focus to South Africa, which has recorded a spike in rhino deaths due to poaching. The carcasses of 24 animals were discovered in the space of 2 weeks, sparking concerns among some conservationists. The Western Cape province was also affected, with 4 rhinos killed. And as CGTN's Travis Andrews reports, conservationists had expected this rise in poaching incidents during this time of the year.
It has been a bloody 2 weeks for South Africa's rhino population, with another 24 animals being lost due to poaching. The carcasses were discovered with their horns removed following different poaching incidents in both private reserves and national parks. South Africa's famed Kruger National Park was also affected, but not as badly as earlier feared.
Fortunately, we haven't been affected that much by this spike because it's a spike that we normally experience around November, December, and we prepare very hard for it. In the month of December alone, we lost 7 animals, as reported recently, and it's a decline from the previous years. The previous years, we've had much higher figures.
According to the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, the rhinos were killed in 4 separate areas, including the KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, the Western Cape, and the Kruger National Park. An intense search for the suspects in the Kruger National Park incident led to their arrests.
The collaboration between ourselves, South African Police Services, and communities adjacent to the Kruger National Park. They gave us information. We conducted intelligence-driven projects where we arrested 3 people and removed 4 rifles from those communities, as well as ammunition.
With 4 rhinos killed in the Inverdoorn Private Game Reserve in the Western Cape, owners are forced to spend significant sums to guard the animals 24 hours a day.
It's a very costly exercise. These people are dedicated to conserving the rhino that they do have. At this point in time, we are losing so many rhino to in our national parks that the rhinos that are actually part of the private or under private ownership are incredibly important to our rhino conservation. So I don't believe that there's any one rhino owner out there, private rhino owner out there, who is not doing the utmost.
This is the second poaching incident to take place in the Western Cape after 2 animals were killed at the Quilla Private Game Reserve in 2011. Both incidents took place on private game reserves, already spending significant sums to guard their animals. Now, the latest incident has concerned them because the region is so rarely targeted by poachers. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
After Hong Kong's Legislative Council election, the region's chief executive, Carrie Lam, is in Beijing to report on administrative affairs to the central government. President Xi Jinping met with Carrie Lam in Beijing on Wednesday. The president says Hong Kong's transition from chaos to better governance has been further consolidated over the past year. Lam's report shows COVID-19 prevention and control measures have been effective and that the economy has gradually recovered. The two also discussed last week's Legislative Council vote, the first under the city's new election laws. President Xi says broad and balanced participation from all social sectors has been established. He says the election laws are in line with one country, two systems and Hong Kong's political reality. President Xi also met Wednesday with Macau Special Administrative Region Chief Executive Mr. Ho Lat Seng, who came to Beijing to administrative report on Macau. Xi said Macau has maintained a stable development and effective pandemic control. He says Macau's economy has gradually recovered and the city has supported small businesses. The president also said the legal system has been improved. Central authorities vow to keep firmly implementing the one country, two systems policy and promoting Macau's economic development. All right, let's now catch up with the day's business news. For the very latest, we cross over to Rama.
Thank you very much, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in business news. What a public outcry in Zimbabwe over a proposed tax on smartphones. And post-harvest wastage in Nigeria is now topping a worrying $8 million a year. All right, then let's start with a couple of stories around taxes and tech, starting in Zimbabwe. There's public outcry in the country over a $50 tax on smartphones, which Zimbabwe's finance minister proposed in the 2022 budget. Now, consumers say it'll push these now indispensable gadgets out of reach for millions. CGTN's Rhino has this report.
With more than 13.2 million active mobile subscriptions in the country, the latest move by Zimbabwe's finance minister is an attempt to follow the money.
You do all your transactions through your mobile device, be it it's mobile money, be it money transfer, be it any electronic transfer. You're now doing it through your mobile device. So the minister realized that this is the most valuable product that anybody can ever have. So it's the easiest product to tax.
While the move will significantly bolster government coffers, it will cost many here who rely on mobile phones as a necessity.
It's an indirect tax on an average individual, yet you know that's our means of communication. For example, schools now require you to have a mobile device in order for you to do e-learning. Companies require you to have a mobile device in order for you to work because you're working from home.
The finance minister has said the $50 tax will target mobile devices for which duty has not been paid. However, questions have been raised about how to prove duties have not been paid, especially since ICT devices were exempt from paying duty as part of efforts to speed up digital transformation. Administering the tax may add an additional layer of costs to mobile network operators who have been tasked with coming up with a registration mechanism to collect the funds.
It may also retard financial inclusion and risks leaving some communities behind.
This straight away is targeting at the informal workers and traders. And when we talk of informal workers and traders, we are also talking of some people who are operating from the rural communities. And the question is now, it means the mobile phones will be very expensive for them to access. Yet we are saying we are now in a digital world.
The government already imposes taxes on airtime and data top-ups and levies a 2% tax on all mobile money transactions. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Still on the business of taxes on tech, this time in Ghana, fighting broke out in Parliament earlier this week as lawmakers debated a proposed tax on electronic transactions. Now, this levy is essentially called the e-levy. In short, it applies at a rate of 1.75%, and it covers a broad range of transactions, including mobile money payments. It was first proposed last month, and it's divided the House for weeks, and in fact, it's actually held up the passing of the national budget. Those challenging it claim it will reduce overall economic activity as it will disproportionately affect lower income persons. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta argues, however, that the levy will widen the tax net and raise an additional $1.15 billion in order to fund the 2022 budget. A vote on whether to proceed with the urgency procedure was postponed until the 18th of January next year. Nigeria's post-harvest losses have become a matter of grave concern. According to the international aid agency ActionAid Nigeria, the West African nation records over $8 million a year in post-harvest losses. Now, the organization is saying that this continuous loss of produce in the country doesn't just affect Nigeria, but the West African region as a whole, since Nigeria is a key player in the regional food supply chain. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam with the details.
Irish potatoes farmer Alex Jeremiah getting rid of potatoes that have gone bad. It's a repeated cycle for the 31-year-old, planting, harvesting and wasting. Many farmers like Alex have no access to modern storage facilities. His 2.5-hectare farmland yields up to $1,500 worth of potatoes per harvest, but he rakes in low profits from selling for less in order to reduce wastes.
In the rainy season, once you harvest, you must sell immediately. If not, it will go bad. And if you take it to the market, the middleman will cut down the prices, not minding how much the farmer has suffered to cultivate. If you harvest 40 bags, lack of storage will make you lose like 5 bags. In the rainy season, we lose more because that one has more water in it.
Nigeria's post-harvest losses have remained a major threat to food sufficiency and losses for farmers like Alex. A report by international organization ActionAid Nigeria pegged yearly post-harvest losses at about $8.5 billion. Insufficient funding remains a major factor driving the losses.
They are having less access to trainings that could also curb post-harvest losses due to low investment in extension services that is needed for them to learn how to also do some post-harvest losses savings. At Nigerian level, the proposed agriculture budget is just 1.78%. That's for 2022. And many other West African countries, they are not putting up to 10% in their annual budget.
Nigeria contributes about 51% to food supply in the West African region. That makes the short and long-term impacts of the post-harvest losses dire on Nigeria and the West African sub-region.
It means that our food import bill will keep on going high and making us to have a lot of trade deficit. And it means that we can't save our foreign exchange because the more we import, the more indirectly the naira gets devalued.
Experts recommend increased investments in storage and other post-harvest management systems.
It's time to engage science, technology, and innovation in building storage solutions, post-harvest solutions that can be homegrown. Those are the things that banks and finance institutions, venture capital should fund because that's actually where the money is.
Experts say that reducing post-harvest losses by 20% will create more jobs and boost food security, well, not just for Nigeria, but countries in the West African region as well. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
From Africa's largest economy to its most industrialized one, the construction industry in South Africa is expected to recover over the next few years. The sector has been in decline in the last 4 years, and it suffered a particularly heavy blow when the pandemic landed on South African shores in 2020. Now, the hard lockdowns in the country had a devastating impact on construction companies. But with recently eased restrictions and a rise in economic activity, the growth prospects for 2022 and beyond are looking a bit better. Sumitra Naidu has a story.
South Africa's construction industry plummeted 20% in 2020 as COVID-19 brought the country to a standstill. According to the results of the 2022 Construction Industry Outlook Survey, in South Africa alone, the total value of plans passed for building construction fell by 37% year-on-year in the first 11 months of 2020, preceded by annual declines of 1.1% and 11.8% in 2018 and 2019, respectively.
Even before COVID, let's go back to basics and let's look at gross fixed capital formation. Gross fixed capital formation as a percentage of GDP. Now, that's an indication of fixed investment in any economy. Now, the global average for GFCF is about 23% of GDP. South Africa's percentage has been declining. Over the years, it's round about, currently about 12%. Now, that's very, very low indeed.
But market forecasts expect the construction industry to recover and record average growth of 3.4% in the next 5 years. A large part of this growth will come from the government's renewed infrastructure investment. The plan is to spend $45 billion on repairs and maintenance of South Africa's railways and other transport. Housing, water and sanitation, as well as agriculture, will also receive attention.
If you look at the national roads in South Africa, they're all still in very good condition. It's only when you get off the national roads and into many of the more regional and rural roads that you see the evidence of neglect over the years. And those roads have got to be repaired. So there's a huge amount of work to be done.
With South Africa's high rate of debt, many are questioning how this infrastructure build will be funded. While some argue renewed spending will revive the economy, others believe more austerity measures are needed.
The problem I have is that there's not enough money at central government level to make a huge difference. Already, central government is beset by massive amounts of debt. It physically can't afford it. Interest rates are starting to rise again. So that's problematic. It's going to have to come from the private sector.
In 2019, the construction industry contributed 4% to GDP and employed over 1.3 million people. If government's infrastructure investment plan works and the industry grows as forecast, a further 1.8 million jobs will be created over the next 10 years. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's head up north now. Tunisia's external debt as a percentage of its GDP rose to 97% last year. That's the highest rate in the North African region. That's according to data published by the African Development Bank. Tunisia's economy has been struggling for years due to political instability, which has further been exacerbated by the damage from the coronavirus pandemic. Here's CGTN's Alain Chouachi with the details from Tunis.
The AFDB report highlights that Tunisia remains more vulnerable to external crises than other North African countries due to its heavy dependence on external debt, which increased by 42.2 points between 2012 and 2020. The Minister of Economy and Planning admits that this situation is critical.
The situation is unacceptable. We're working relentlessly to improve and balance public finances. The solution to indebtedness is to encourage domestic and foreign investment, to create jobs in the private sector, to boost exports and provide additional resources to the state fund in foreign exchange. We also plan to reduce and rationalize public spending.
The African Development Bank warns that the public debt will become unsustainable if Tunisia does not undertake solid and credible reforms with broad domestic support. The country's Minister of Economy and Planning says that the current government has set its priorities for structural reforms.
It's high time for structural and balanced economic reforms in Tunisia. We will focus on the priorities. Reforming the economy quickly will have detrimental results. This will be done in a participative manner by involving all stakeholders and decision makers in the economic and social fields. We call for economic and social solidarity on all levels instead of imposed sacrifices.
Economists assert that Tunisia needs to initiate a new social pact that must start with comprehensive debt relief and a true national dialogue on economic reforms.
The state should not increase tax pressure on the private sector because this will not create a favorable business climate. Tunisia needs rather to involve social partners in a national dialogue on the public sector cost. Tunisia must reduce the public sector wage bill. Public and external debt have a direct impact on economic growth and job creation.
Financial analysts explain that gross public financing needs in the country would remain in a high range of 14 to 18% of GDP on an annual basis. Moreover, 70% of public debt is external and exceeded 80% of GDP in 2020.
According to the latest report published by the African Development Bank, in the absence of a credible framework of reforms in Tunisia, the country's gross public debt should reach nearly 100% of GDP in the medium term. In addition, debt service costs absorb 28% of the budget, which limits other than development spending. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And I'll leave you there for the time being, but I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be taking a closer look at Sudan. Uncertainty over there does continue to reign after the Prime Minister was reported to have indicated his intent to resign. So where exactly does that leave the East African country? We'll explore that live from Khartoum at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports. Kenyan 1,500 meters champion Elijah Manangoi excited about return to the track after serving a 2-year ban.